The diplomatic chamber of the Xerathi Imperial Palace was a study in alien grandeur. Its crystalline walls reaching heights that made even the most impressive human architecture seem quaint by comparison.
Captain Marcus Chen stood at attention.
His compact 5 feet 10 inches frame dwarfed by the massive throne that dominated the far end of the hall. The throne itself was carved from a single piece of what looked like living starlight, its surface shifting between colors that had no names in any human language. "The human delegation has arrived, Your Radiance," he announced. A towering guard whose armor seemed to be grown rather than forged, its organic curves following the 7-foot frame of what Marcus assumed was a relatively short member of the Xerathi. Species, before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. If this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus touched the universal translator embedded behind his ear, a gesture more of nervous habit than necessity. The device had been thoroughly tested, but this was humanity's first official contact with the Xerathi Empire, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The war with the Korvax Collective had pushed Earth's forces to the brink, and they desperately needed allies, especially ones with the Xerathi's legendary military might. "Send them forward," came a voice that seemed to resonate through the very air itself, carrying harmonics that made Marcus's bones vibrate in ways that weren't entirely unpleasant. As Marcus led his small delegation forward, he couldn't help but notice how their footsteps echoed differently here, as if the palace itself was listening. Dr. Sarah Kovac, their xenobiologist, walked beside him, her eyes wide with scientific curiosity as she tried to catalog every detail. Behind them, Lieutenant Commander Torres maintained a professional distance, his hand never straying far from the ceremonial but fully functional plasma pistol at his hip. The throne began to glow more intensely as they approached, and Marcus got his first clear view of the figure seated upon it. Nothing in the briefings had prepared him for the reality of Empress Xerathi Ven, the Xerath. She was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, standing even while seated at least 7 feet tall. But it was when she rose to her full height that Marcus truly understood why the Xerathi were spoken of in hushed tones across the galaxy. 9 feet of perfectly proportioned alien royalty towered above them, her skin a deep violet that seemed to absorb light and reflect it back in mesmerizing patterns. Her hair, if it could be called that, was a cascade of bioluminescent tendrils that moved with a life of their own, creating a crown of living light around her angular, impossibly beautiful face, her eyes larger than any humans and containing at least 3 distinct iris patterns fixed on Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. It wasn't a cruel sound exactly, but it carried an unmistakable note of condescension that made Marcus's jaw tighten. The laugh rippled through the chamber, picked up and echoed by the other Xerathi present until it became a symphony of alien amusement. "So, Empress Xerathi Ven said," her voice carrying that same multitonal quality that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the nervous system. "These are the humans who claim they can help us against the Korvax." She descended from her throne with a grace that seemed to defy physics, each movement flowing into the next, like liquid mercury. "I had heard reports of your stature, but seeing it in person is ... illuminating." She circled them slowly, and Marcus forced himself to remain still as she examined them like specimens in a lab. Up close, he could see that her skin wasn't simply violet but contained thousands of tiny bioluminescent cells that created constantly shifting patterns. Her scent was unlike anything he'd encountered: ozone and jasmine, and something else that made his hindbrain simultaneously want to run and move closer. "Tell me, little human," she said, stopping directly in front of Marcus. She had to bend down significantly to look him in the eye, a gesture that was clearly calculated to emphasize their height difference. "How exactly does your species propose to aid us when you can barely reach my shoulder? Do you perhaps have some technology that compensates for your ... limitations?" Dr. Kovac started to speak, but Marcus held up a hand. He'd dealt with enough posturing in his military career to recognize a test when he saw one. "With respect, Your Radiance," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the way her presence seemed to press against him like a physical force. "Humanity has survived and thrived not because of our size, but because of our adaptability. We've faced species larger than ourselves before and found ways to not just survive, but to win." The Empress's expression shifted, her trio of iris patterns contracting in what might have been interest. "When your combat records suggest otherwise? According to our intelligence, you've lost 40% of your colonies to the Korvax in the past solar cycle alone." "Which is why we're here," Marcus admitted, seeing no point in denying the obvious. "We're not too proud to seek allies when we need them. But don't mistake our request for partnership as weakness. We have things to offer beyond our physical presence, such as—" She leaned closer, and Marcus caught another wave of that intoxicating scent. There was something almost predatory in her expression now, though whether it was hostile or simply curious he couldn't tell. "Our tactical flexibility, for one. Humans excel at unconventional warfare. We think outside the parameters that constrain other species. Our neural plasticity allows us to adapt to new situations faster than most known. Sentience." He paused, then added, "And we have something else. Something the Korvax haven't encountered before." "Which is," Marcus smiled slightly, "stubbornness. Pure irrational, human stubbornness. We don't know when we're supposed to lose, so we often don't." For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then the Empress laughed again, but this time it was different, less mocking, more genuinely amused. "Stubbornness," she repeated, straightening to her full height. "You would stand before the Xerathi Empire and list stubbornness as a military asset?" She turned to address her court. "What think you, my advisors? Should we ally ourselves with these stubborn little creatures?" A figure even taller than the Empress stepped forward, a male Xerathi, whose skin was a deeper purple, almost black, with scars that glowed a soft blue. "Your Radiance," he said, his voice even deeper than hers. "While their size is unfortunate, their combat records do show a remarkable tendency toward survival. Their tactics against the Korvax have been ... innovative." "Innovative," the Empress mused, beginning to circle Marcus again. "Yes, I suppose desperation does breed innovation." "Very well, Captain Chen. We will hear your full proposal. But first, there are protocols to observe. The Xerathi do not simply ally with anyone who asks. There must be ... compatibility tests." "What kind of tests?" Lieutenant Commander Torres spoke for the first time, his hand instinctively moving toward his weapon. The Empress's gaze shifted to him, and her expression became decidedly predatory. "Stand down, little warrior. If we meant you harm, you would already be atoms." She waved a hand, and Torres's weapon flew from its holster into her grasp. She examined it with the same condescending amusement she'd shown toward them, then tossed it back. Torres caught it, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "The tests are not violent," she continued, returning her attention to Marcus. "Physical compatibility, mental resilience, biological adaptation. We must know if humans can even survive long-term cooperation with Xerathi. Our environments, our technology, even our presence can be overwhelming for lesser species. We're prepared for whatever tests you deem necessary," Marcus said firmly. "Are you?" She moved closer again. This time Marcus noticed something else's subtle vibration in the air around her, like standing near a massive power generator. "The first test has already begun, Captain. You've been breathing our atmosphere for several minutes now. How do you feel?" Now that she mentioned it, Marcus did feel different. His skin tingled slightly. Colors seemed more vivid than before. Dr. Kovac was discreetly checking her bioscanner, her eyes widening at whatever she was seeing. Elevated heart rate, increased neural activity, minor physiological adaptations. "Already beginning?" the Empress observed, though how she knew that without any visible instruments? Marcus couldn't guess. Interesting. Most species experience severe distress by now. Your bodies are already trying to adapt. That's unexpected. "Humans are full of surprises," Marcus said, proud that his voice remained steady, despite the increasingly strange sensations coursing through him, perhaps. She returned to her throne but didn't sit. Very well. You will be given quarters in the diplomatic wing. Tomorrow, we begin the formal compatibility assessments. If you pass in, that is a significant if-then. We will discuss the terms of an alliance. She paused, then added with what might have been a smile, try not to die in your sleep. Our atmosphere has been known to cause vivid dreams in other species. Something about the psychoactive spores our plants release. Perfectly harmless to us, of course. Of course, Marcus echoed dryly. One more thing, Captain. The Empress's voice carried a note of warning. You should know that many in my court oppose even considering an alliance with such a physically inferior species. You will need to prove yourselves worthy and not just. To me, Admiral Kexton, for instance, she gestured to the scarred male who had spoken earlier, believes your species would be better suited as a client race rather than allies. Admiral Kexton's expression confirmed this assessment, his glowing scars pulsing slightly brighter as he regarded the humans with obvious disdain. We'll prove ourselves, Marcus said confidently. Whatever it takes, the Empress repeated, and something in her expression shifted again. Be careful what you promise, little human. The Xerathi have long memories and no patience for those who fail to keep their word. As they were escorted from the throne room by guards who towered over them like walking trees, Dr. Kovac moved close to Marcus. Captain, she whispered urgently, the atmospheric readings, there's definitely something bioactive in the air. Our bodies are undergoing minor mutations at the cellular level. Nothing harmful so far, but we're changing, Marcus finished. Adapting? Yes, but to what end? And how far will the changes go? Marcus glanced back at the throne room, where the Empress's silhouette could still be seen, glowing with that otherworldly light. I guess we're about to find out. Their quarters, when they reached them, were clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. The doorways were 12 feet tall, the furniture scaled to match. It would have been comical if not for the underlying reminder of how physically outmatched they were. This is insane, Tora said once they were alone. They're treating us like children. Like pets. They're testing us, Marcus corrected. Everything about this meeting was calculated. It's the condescension, the displays of power. She wants to see how we react under pressure. And the atmospheric changes. Dr. Kovac was still studying her readings. Captain, our bodies are adapting at an unprecedented rate. It's like the planet itself is rewriting our DNA to be more compatible. Compatible with what? Torres demanded. Before anyone could answer, the lights in their quarters shifted, taking on the same bioluminescent quality as the Xerathi themselves. Marcus felt his skin tingle more intensely, and for a moment, he could have sworn he saw patterns of light moving under his skin, similar to those of the Empress. With them, Marcus said quietly, the question is this part of their test, or something else entirely? As if in response to his words, a holographic message appeared in the air before them. It was the Empress, though this recording seemed more casual, less formal than her throne room persona. Captain Chen, her image said, I hope you find your quarters acceptable. I wanted to privately inform you that you've already passed the first test simply by surviving initial exposure to our world. Most species require extensive biomodification to even breathe here safely. The fact that your bodies are naturally adapting is ... intriguing. The hologram shifted, showing a star map. The Korvacs are pressing both our borders. If we are to work together, we need to know humans can survive not just on our worlds, but fighting alongside us. Our weapons, our ships, our very presence requires biological compatibility that goes beyond simple environmental suits. Her expression became more serious. What happens over the next few days will determine not just whether we become allies, but whether humanity has any future among the stars at all. The Korvacs show no mercy to species they deem inferior. You need us, Captain. The question is whether we need you. The hologram faded, leaving them in the shifting alien light. Well, Tora said after a moment, at least she's being honest about the stakes. Marcus moved to the massive window that overlooked the city beyond the palace. The Xerathi capital was a wonder of bioengineering, with buildings that seemed to grow from the ground itself, connected by bridges of living light. Flying vehicles moved between the structures, their occupants all sharing that impressive height and alien beauty that marked their species. "We're going to pass their tests," Marcus said firmly. "Whatever they throw at us, we'll adapt. We'll survive. And we'll show them that size isn't everything." "Sir," Dr. Kovac said hesitantly, "there's something else. The bioscans I'm getting. The changes aren't random. They're following a specific pattern, like our bodies are being prepared for something. Prepared for what? I don't know yet. But whatever the Xerathi have planned for us, I don't think it's just about military alliance. There's something else going on here. Something they're not telling us." Marcus nodded slowly. He'd had the same feeling since the moment the Empress had first looked at him. With those impossible eyes that seemed to see more than they should. "Then we play along until we know more," he decided. "Tomorrow, we show them what humans are capable of. And maybe we find out what they really want from us in the process." As night fell over the alien city, the three humans tried to rest in beds made for giants. While their bodies continued to change in subtle ways, in the throne room far above, Empress Xerathi Ven stood at her own window, watching the same city view. Your Radiance Admiral Kexthon appeared beside her. "Do you truly believe these humans are worth our time? Barely more than insects compared to us." "Perhaps," she said thoughtfully, "but I sense something in them, particularly their leader. A potential that goes beyond their physical limitations." "You're thinking of the prophecy," Kexthon said, disapproval clear in his voice. "The prophecy speaks of unity between the great and small, of strength found in what appears weak," she reminded him. "These humans, they adapt, they survive, they endure. Perhaps those are the qualities we need. Or perhaps you're simply curious about their other qualities," the Admiral suggested carefully. The Empress's patterns flared brighter for a moment. "Whatever my motivations, Admiral, remember that the survival of our empire may depend on finding new solutions. The Korvax grow stronger, while we cling to old ways. Maybe it's time to consider that size and strength aren't the only measures of worth." She dismissed him with a gesture and returned to her contemplation. Tomorrow would begin the real tests. And she found herself unexpectedly eager to see how the small human captain would perform. In his oversized bed, Marcus Chen tossed and turned as dreams filled with violet light and impossible sensations washed over him. His body continued its slow transformation, adapting to a world and a species that by all rights should have been beyond human capability to endure. The alliance between Earth and the Xerathi Empire hung in the balance. That's what something else was. Beginning as well something that neither species could have predicted. And that would change the course of both their civilizations forever. Marcus woke to the sound of harmonics that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The bioluminescent patterns in the room had shifted during the night, creating a gentle wake-up call that was surprisingly pleasant despite its alien nature. He sat up, immediately noticing the differences in his body. His vision was sharper, picking up spectrums of light he'd never seen before. When he looked at his hands, he could see faint patterns beneath the skin, like circuitry made of starlight, Captain. Dr. Kovac's voice came from the common area. "You need to see this." Marcus found her and Tora standing before a mirror that took up an entire wall. The reflections showed the extent of their overnight transformation. Their eyes had developed a faint inner glow, and their skin had taken on a subtle luminescence that became more pronounced in the room's shifting light. "The adaptation is accelerating," Kovac reported, her scientific excitement warring with concern. "Our bodies are developing characteristics similar to the Xerathi enhanced sensory perception. Increased muscle density despite no visible size change. And what appears to be the beginning of biophotonic cellular structures." "English, Doc," Torres said, flexing his hand and watching the play of light beneath his skin. "We're becoming more like them, at least partially. Our bodies are finding a middle ground between human and Xerathi physiology." She paused, checking her scanner. "The remarkable thing is, it's not damaging us. If anything, we're becoming enhanced versions of ourselves." A chime sounded, and the massive doors to their quarters opened. A Xerathi guard stood there, having to duck slightly too. "Enter." "Up close?" Marcus could see more details of their physiology, the way their bioluminescent patterns seemed to pulse with their heartbeat. The subtle scales that caught the light like diamonds. The Empress requires your presence for the first trial, the guard announced, her voice carrying those characteristic harmonics. You will follow me. They were led through corridors that seemed to grow organically from the palace structure itself. Other Xerathi they passed watched them with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disdain. Marcus noticed that even the shortest Xerathi they saw stood at least 7 feet tall, making their small group look like children. Being escorted through an adult world, the guard brought them to a vast chamber. It looked like a combination of arena and laboratory. The Empress stood at the center, now dressed in what appeared to be combat attire. Form-fitting armor that accentuated her impressive height while allowing for maximum mobility. Around the edges of the chamber, various Xerathi officials and scientists observed from elevated plats. Captain Chen, the Empress called out, her voice carrying easily across the space. I trust you slept well. The dreams can be quite intense for first-timers. Marcus stepped forward, refusing to be intimidated by the setting. Well enough, your radiance. Though I suspect you already know exactly how we slept, given the monitoring systems built into your architecture. A smile played at the corners of her mouth, an expression that made her alien features somehow more relatable. Observant. Yes, we monitored your adaptation. The rate of change is unprecedented. Most species require weeks of gradual exposure to achieve what your bodies did overnight. We're adaptable, Marcus said simply, so you claimed. You'll have the chance to prove it. She gestured, and the floor of the arena began to shift, forming obstacles and terrain features. The first trial is simple survive. Before Marcus could ask for clarification, ports opened in the walls and training drones emerged. They were roughly humanoid in shape but scaled to Xerathi proportions, making them tower over the humans. Their movements were fluid, predatory. These drones are calibrated to Xerathi combat standards, the Empress explained, moving to an observation. Platform with inhuman grace. They will not kill you probably, but they will not hold back either. Show us how humans fight when outmatched. The first drone lunged at Marcus with speed that should have been impossible for something so large. But his enhanced reflexes kicked in, and he rolled aside, the drone's fist cracking the floor where he'd been standing. Spread out, Marcus commanded. Use the terrain. Torres had already drawn his plasma pistol, firing shots that splashed harmlessly. Against the drone's armor? Great, they're shielded. Then we do this the hard way, Marcus said, analyzing the drone's movements. They were fast and strong, but they moved like Xerathi, expecting to fight opponents of similar size. That was an advantage he could exploit, Dr. Kovac.
Not.
Despite being a scientist rather than a soldier, showed surprising agility as she dodged between obstacles. The atmospheric changes had enhanced all of them, giving them reflexes and strength. Beyond normal human limits, Marcus ducked under a sweeping arm, noting how the drone's joints moved. Every design had weaknesses, and these were built for fighting large opponents. He rolled between the drone's legs, coming up behind it and jumping onto its back. His enhanced muscles, while not matching Xerathi's strength, were enough to let him reach what he was looking for, an exposed control node at the base of its neck. He struck hard, and the drone stumbled. Not down, but disrupted. It was enough. The neck, he shouted. Base of the neck, there's a weakness. Torres, always quick on the uptake, immediately changed tactics. Instead of firing at center mass, he aimed for the joints and sensory clusters, using the drone's size against it by staying too close for it to effectively strike. Dr. Kovac surprised everyone by using her scanner as an improvised weapon, sending out pulse waves that interfered with the drone's sensors. They're using biophotonic control systems, she called out. I can disrupt them. The battle continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The humans used teamwork, adaptability, and their smaller size to outmaneuver opponents. That should have crushed them easily. When the last drone finally fell, Marcus stood breathing hard, his enhanced body already recovering faster than should have been possible. Slow clapping echoed through the chamber. The Empress descended from her platform, and Marcus noticed that several of the watching Xerathi looked surprised, even impressed. Innovative, she said, circling the defeated drones. Using our own design philosophy against us, the drones were built to fight Xerathicized opponents, and you exploited that assumption. She stopped in front of Marcus. But you had help. Your body's adaptation gave you advantages a normal human wouldn't have. Adaptation is one of our strengths, Marcus pointed out. We don't just fight the enemy, we become whatever we need to be to win, perhaps. She moved closer, and Marcus caught that scent of gonozone and flowers, and something that made his enhanced senses sing. But the trials are far from over. This was merely a warm-up. Admiral Kexton stepped forward from the observer platforms. Your Radiance, perhaps I might suggest the next trial. If these humans truly wish to prove themselves worthy allies— The Empress raised a hand. What did you have in mind, Admiral? Single combat, he said, his scarred face showing what might have been a smile. Let their champion face one of ours. Not drones, but flesh and blood. Let them show if human courage extends beyond fighting machines. Murmurs ran through the assembled Xerathi. Single combat was clearly significant in their culture. And who would you suggest as our champion? The Empress asked, though something in her tone suggested she already knew the answer. I offer myself, Kexton said, dropping from the platform with a ground-shaking impact. Up close, he was even more imposing than the Empress' nearly 10 feet of scarred warrior muscle. Unless the humans are afraid to face a real opponent? Marcus stepped forward before he could think better of it. I accept.
Captain?
Torres started, but Marcus cut him off with a gesture. Terms, Marcus asked, keeping his eyes on Kexton. Blood, the Empress interjected before Kexton could speak. This is a trial, not an execution. And to make it ... interesting, ... she produced what looked like a pair of bracers. Xerathi, battle enhancement. They'll increase your strength and speed to something approaching our baseline. Otherwise, this would be over in seconds. Marcus accepted the bracers, feeling them conform to his arms with an almost organic flexibility. The moment they activated, power surged through him, not enough to match Kexton's raw strength, but enough to make it a fight rather than a slaughter. Admiral is one of our finest warriors, the Empress said quietly as Marcus prepared. He has never lost a single combat trial. Try not to die too quickly would be disappointing. Something in her tone made Marcus look at her sharply. Was that concern he heard, or just amusement at the spectacle? The combat ring formed around them, a circle of light on the arena floor. Kexton rolled his massive shoulders, his bioluminescent scars creating patterns that were probably meant to be intimidating. It worked. You should have let your military officer fight, Kexton. Said at least then, your delegation would maintain some dignity in defeat. We'll see about dignity, Marcus replied, settling into a combat stance. Kexton moved first, faster than anything that size had a right to be. Even with the enhanced reflexes from the bracers and his body's adaptation, Marcus barely dodged. The first strike. The Admiral's fist passed so close that the displaced air ruffled his hair, but Marcus had been in uneven fights before. Size and strength were advantages, but they weren't everything. He stayed mobile, using his smaller size to stay inside Kexton's reach where the Admiral's longer limbs were less effective. Stop running, little human. Kexton growled, frustration beginning to show as Marcus continued to evade and counter. Landing quick strikes that wouldn't do much damage but were starting to add up? It's called tactics, Marcus shot back. Ducking under another swing and landing an enhanced punch to what he hoped was a kidney equivalent, the fight continued. Marcus began to notice something. The bioluminescent patterns on his own skin were responding to the combat, creating their own light show that seemed to interfere with Kexton's ability to track him. His body wasn't just adapting to the environment, it was learning to use Xerathi abilities in uniquely human ways. Interesting, he heard the Empress murmur from the sidelines. Kexton. Growing frustrated, committed to a massive overhead strike designed to end the fight. It was the opening Marcus had been waiting for. Didn't try to block or fully dodge. Instead, he redirected the force, using Kexton's own momentum against him, while simultaneously striking at a cluster of nerves. Dr. Kovacs scans had identified as vulnerable The Admiral's eyes widened in shock as his arm went temporarily numb. It was only for a second, but it was enough. Marcus pressed his advantage, landing a series of rapid strikes that finally drew a thin line of glowing blue blood from a cut on Kexton's cheek. "First blood," the Empress announced immediately. "The trial is concluded." Kexton touched his cheek, looking at the blood with disbelief. Around the arena, the watching Xerathi were silent, processing what they'd just witnessed. "You fought well," Marcus said, offering a respectful nod to the Admiral. Kexton stared at him for a long moment, then returned the nod slowly. "You fight." "Without honor," he said, but there was something like respect in his voice. "But you fight to win. Perhaps there is something to your species after all." "High praise from the Admiral," the Empress said, approaching them. She moved past Kexton without a glance, stopping directly in front of Marcus. "You continue to surprise, Captain, using our own bioluminescence against us, identifying nerve clusters through observation alone, turning strength into liability. These are not the tactics of a mere soldier." "I've had to learn to punch above my weight class," Marcus said, trying not to show how exhausted he was. Even with the enhancements, fighting someone like Kexton was draining. "Indeed." She reached out, and before Marcus could react, touched the spot where his bioluminescent patterns were most pronounced. The contact sent a shock through his system that was definitely not unpleasant. "Your adaptation is even more remarkable than the initial readings suggested. You're not just copying our traits, you're innovating with them." "Your radiance," one of the scientific observers called down. "Perhaps we should run more detailed scans. This level of adaptive integration is unprecedented." Later, she said, not moving away from Marcus, "There is still one more trial for today." "Another fight?" Torres asked, hand on his weapon. "No," the Empress smiled, and it was definitely predatory. "This time, something far more challenging for your species. You must attend a formal dinner." Marcus blinked. "A dinner? You've proven you can fight? You've shown adaptability. But can humans navigate Xerathi's social structures? Can you conduct diplomacy when every other guest towers over you and sees you as inferior?" She leaned down, bringing her face closer to his. "Can you make them see you as equals through words rather than fists?" "We accept," Marcus said, meeting her gaze steadily. "Excellent. You'll be seated at my table, of course, as my personal guests." She straightened, addressing all three humans. "Formal attire will be provided. Try not to embarrass yourselves or me." As she turned to leave, she paused. "Oh, and Captain, you might want to clean up. You have Admiral Kexton's blood on your uniform. While it is a badge of honor, it might send the wrong message at dinner." After she left, Dr. Kovac immediately began scanning Marcus. "Captain, the changes accelerated during the combat. Your biophotonic cells are now actively networked, similar to their neural enhancement systems. In the area where she touched you, ... what about it? The cells there are showing increased activity, almost like they're trying to communicate with something." Marcus looked down at his arm where the Empress had made contact. The patterns there were indeed more vibrant, pulsing with a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. "One crisis at a time, Doc," he said. "Right now, we need to figure out how to survive a dinner party where everyone else is literally looking down on us. At least at dinner they probably won't try to kill us," Torres offered. "No," Marcus agreed, thinking of the way the Empress had looked at him, the way her touch had affected his transformed cells. "They'll probably do something worse. They'll try to seduce us into forgetting we're equals." As they returned to their quarters to prepare, none of them noticed the small drone that had been recording everything. In her private chambers, Empress Xerathi Ven reviewed the footage, particularly the moment when Marcus had turned Kexton's strength against him. "Computer," she said, "cross-reference the human's biosignature with the ancient texts. Specifically, the prophecy of convergence." The results made her patterns flare bright with surprise and something else anticipation. "So," she murmured, watching Marcus's image, the small warrior who adapts and overcomes, "could you really be the one the prophecy spoke of? The bridge between great and small?" She touched her screen where his image was displayed, remembering the feeling of his transformed cells responding to hers. Tonight's dinner just became far more interesting. The formal attire provided for the dinner was unlike anything Marcus had worn before. The fabric seemed alive, adjusting to his body temperature and responding to his bioluminescent patterns with complementary shifts in color. It was clearly designed for someone taller, but it somehow adjusted to fit him perfectly another. Example of Xerathi, adaptive technology. "How do I look?" Dr. Kovac asked, emerging in her own outfit. The dress flowed like liquid starlight, making her appear taller while accentuating the new luminescent qualities of her skin. "Like you belong in a fairy tale," Torres said, tugging at his own formal military-style jacket. "A very alien fairy tale." Marcus checked his reflection one last time. The transformation was remarkable. He still looked human, but enhanced. His eyes now held 3 distinct color patterns, like the Xerathi, and his skin's bioluminescence created subtle patterns that pulsed with his heartbeat. The formal wear somehow made him look more imposing despite his relatively small stature. "Remember," he said to his team, "we're not just representing humanity tonight. We're proving we deserve to stand as equals. No showing weakness, no accepting condescension." "Even if the shortest person there could use us as armrests?" Torres asked. "Especially then." Their escort arrived a young Xerathi female who seemed fascinated by them. "I am Liranel," she said, her patterns flickering with what might have been nervousness. "I'm to bring you to the dining hall, the Empress. She has never invited another species to her personal table before. The court is most curious." As they walked through corridors that grew progressively grander, Liranel kept stealing glances at them. Finally, Marcus asked, "Is something wrong?" "No. I mean, ... Her pattern shifted to what seemed like embarrassment. "It's just that you're so different from what we expected. When the Empress announced humans would attend, we thought, ... well, that we'd be primitive," Dr. Kovac suggested gently. "Helpless," Liranel admitted. "But you defeated Admiral Kexton, and your adaptation rate. Some of the scientists think you might be the ones from the prophecy." "What prophecy?" Marcus asked, but they'd reached the dining hall doors before she could answer. The doors opened to reveal a spectacle. It took their breath away. The dining hall was a massive chamber with a transparent ceiling showing the alien stars. Tables floated at various heights, accommodating the different sizes of Xerathi subspecies. At the center, on a raised platform, was the Empress's table. Hundreds of Xerathi turned to stare as they entered. The silence was deafening. Then the Empress stood, all 9 feet of her resplendent, in a gown that seemed woven from nebulas. "Lords and ladies of the Xerathi Empire," her voice carried throughout the hall, "I present Captain Marcus Chen and his delegation from Earth. They are here as potential allies and my personal guests. Any disrespect shown to them is disrespect." To me, the threat in her tone was unmistakable. The assembly inclined their heads in acknowledgement, though Marcus caught plenty of skeptical expressions. "Come," the Empress commanded. "Your seats await." The walk to her table felt like miles. Marcus kept his head high, meeting the gazes of those who stared too long. When they reached the platform, he saw that chairs had been provided that would bring them to a more equal height, with the other dinars a thoughtful gesture that he appreciated. "Captain Chen, you will sit beside me," the Empress indicated. The position of honor, but also the most exposed. As Marcus took his seat, he noticed the other diners at the royal table, all higher-ranking Xerathi, including Admiral Kexton, who nodded respectfully to Marcus. Whatever else the Admiral was, he honored the outcome of their combat. "Tell me, Captain," the Empress said, as exotic dishes began appearing on the table. "What do you think of our food?" Marcus looked at the array before him, dishes that glowed, steamed with colors that shouldn't exist, and moved slightly on their plates. His enhanced senses told him they were safe, even beneficial to his changing physiology. "I think," he said, selecting something that looked like a fruit made of crystallized light, "that like everything else about the Xerathi, it's designed to challenge assumptions." He bit into the fruit, and flavors exploded across his palate tastes his original human form could never have processed. Around the table, he saw surprise and approval at his willingness to eat without hesitation. "Most species require extensive testing before they can consume our food," an elderly Xerathi commented. "Your adaptation is remarkable. Adaptation is survival," Marcus replied. "Humans learned that early in our evolution. And yet another diner interjected. You seek our aid because you cannot adapt quickly enough to defeat the Korvax. How do you reconcile this? By recognizing that true strength sometimes means acknowledging when you need allies, Marcus said. The Korvax are pressing your borders too. Perhaps instead of debating who needs whom more, we should focus on what we can achieve together. Boldly spoken, the Empress said, and Marcus felt her approval like warmth against his skin.
Else then?
What can Earth offer the Xerathi Empire? This was the moment Marcus had prepared for. Innovation, perspective, tactical flexibility. He stood, knowing that even with the raised chair, he was still shorter than everyone else at the table. But his bioluminescent patterns flared with confidence. You've seen me fight. I defeated your admiral not through strength, but by thinking differently. Imagine what our combined forces could do. Xerathi, power guided by human innovation. Ready? Words, someone called from another table. But you're still asking us to ally with insects? The Empress's patterns flared dangerously, but Marcus held up a hand. May I address this? She nodded, curiosity evident in her expression. Marcus turned to face the speaker, a heavily decorated Xerathi military officer. You see us as insects? Small, weak, insignificant. His patterns began pulsing in a rhythm he'd observed in dominant Xerathi. But have you ever watched insects work? They build colonies that span continents. They adapt to every environment. They survive catastrophes that destroy larger species. He drew on the memories from his enhanced state, letting his bioluminescence tell a story the way he'd seen Xerathi do.
Ow.
Humans are the insects of the galaxy. We're everywhere, adapting, surviving, thriving. When we work together, we can move mountains. Dismiss us at your peril. Silence followed his words. Then, surprisingly, Admiral Kexton began to laugh, a deep, rumbling sound. Well said, little warrior. Perhaps there is wisdom in the prophecy after all? What is this prophecy everyone keeps mentioning? Dr. Kovac asked. The Empress rose, her presence commanding absolute attention. The prophecy of convergence, written by our ancestors when they first achieved spaceflight. It speaks of a time when the Xerathi would face an enemy that could not be defeated by strength alone. In that time, salvation would come from joining with those we considered lesser, the small, who adapt, the weak who endure. From this union would come something new, something greater than either species alone. She looked directly at Marcus. Many believed it was metaphor, but watching you fight, seeing how your bodies change, feeling how your biopatterns respond to ours, ... She moved closer, and Marcus stood to meet her. Even with the platform's height advantage, she still towered over him. Show them, she commanded softly. Show them what I discovered when I touched you earlier. Marcus understood. He reached out, placing his hand against hers. The moment their skin made contact, the reaction was immediate and undeniable. Their bioluminescent patterns synchronized, creating a display of light that filled the entire hall. But more than that, everyone present could feel a harmony between human and Xerathi that resonated at a cellular level. The convergence, someone whispered. They're compatible.
Ow.
The Empress didn't break contact, and Marcus felt something. Flowing between them, not just energy, but understanding. Through their connected biopatterns, he could sense her thoughts, her emotions, the weight of leadership, the fear for her people's future, and underneath it all, a growing fascination with him that went beyond political necessity. Your radiance, an elderly advisor said carefully. If they are truly compatible, then the implications... Yes, she said, still not looking away from Marcus. The prophecy speaks not just of alliance, but of union. Children who would inherit the best of both species. Her patterns shifted to something Marcus instinctively recognized as vulnerability. But that choice remains with those involved. The meaning was clear, and the hall erupted in discussion. Some were outraged at the suggestion, others intrigued by the possibilities. Through it all, Marcus maintained the connection with the Empress, letting her see his own thoughts, his attraction to her that went beyond the physical, his genuine desire to save both their peoples, his willingness to do whatever necessary. You would consider this? She asked quietly for his ears alone. Knowing what it would mean? The first human Xerathi hybrid would change everything. I've been changing since the moment I set foot on your world, Marcus replied. And every change has made me more certain that this is right. It's not just the alliance, but this. He gestured to their joined hands, the light still dancing between them. She smiled then. A real smile that transformed her alien features into something beautiful. You are not what I expected, Marcus Chen. Neither are you, Xerathi Ven. The use of her name without titles caused another stir, but she didn't correct him. Instead, she addressed the assembly. The trials are complete. Humanity has proven their worth as warriors, diplomats, and now as potential partners in the fullest sense. I declare the alliance between Earth and the Xerathi Empire approved. And the other matter? Admiral Kexton asked, his tone carefully neutral. That, the Empress said, finally releasing Marcus's hand, though the loss of contact was almost painful, will be addressed in time. For now, we have a war to plan. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of negotiations and planning. But Marcus was aware of the Empress watching him, just as he couldn't stop watching her. The connection they'd shared had awakened something in both of them. Later, as the formal dinner concluded, the Empress drew Marcus aside. Walk with me, she commanded, though it sounded more like a request. They walked through gardens where bioluminescent plants created a fantasy landscape. Despite their height difference, they found a comfortable rhythm. The prophecy, she began. I never believed in it. It seemed like wishful thinking, a fairy tale to give hope in dark times. And now I have felt the truth of it. She stopped beside a fountain that sang with harmonious waters. Our species are compatible in ways that should be impossible. Your adaptation, our enhancement together, they create something new? Is that the only reason you're interested? Marcus asked, needing to know. She laughed, the sound like music. You defeated my greatest warrior, challenged my court, and stood as my equal, despite being half my size. You adapted to our world in days when it takes others years, when we touched, ... Her pattern shifted to something Marcus was beginning to recognize as desire. I have lived for 2 centuries, Marcus Chen. I have never felt anything like that before. The feeling is mutual, Marcus admitted, though I have to ask, how would it even work? The size difference alone. Our scientists believe the adaptation would continue, she said, moving closer. Your body would change as needed. You're already taller than when you arrived. In time, who knows? But size. She knelt, bringing them to eye level. Size is just one aspect of compatibility. Marcus reached out, touching her face gently. Their patterns synchronized again, and he felt her sharp intake of breath. This is insane. A week ago, I didn't even know the Xerathi existed. Now, you're considering becoming the father of a new species, she finished. I know it's sudden, but we're at war, Marcus. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed. What I feel when we touch, it's worth any risk. Marcus made his decision. Then let's take the risk. She kissed him then, and it was like touching a star. Their biopatterns merged completely, and Marcus felt his body responding, adapting even faster. ... He was changing, becoming something that could match her, complement her. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard, their patterns dancing in perfect synchronization. There will be challenges, she warned. Many will oppose this, both human and Xerathi. Let them try, Marcus said, surprised by the fierce protectiveness he felt. We'll face them together. 6 months later, the combined human Xerathi fleet achieved its first major victory against the Korvax. The tactical fusion of human innovation and Xerathi power proved devastating to enemies who had grown complacent. But the real victory, Max thought as he stood beside Zara on the command deck, was more personal. His body had continued to adapt, and while he hadn't reached Xerathi's height, he now stood 7 feet tall, still shorter than his wife, but tall enough that she only had to bend slightly to kiss him. The Korvax are retreating, Admiral Kexton reported. Your strategy worked perfectly. Our strategy, Marcus corrected, his hand finding Zara's. Their wedding had been a galactic event, the first union between human and Xerathi. The controversy had been intense, but their combined leadership was proving too effective to argue with. Marcus. Dr. Kovac's voice came over the comm, excitement barely contained. You need to come to medical. The scans. We're pregnant, Zara finished, her patterns glowing with joy. Right. We know. We've known for weeks. The bridge erupted in cheers from both human and Xerathi crew members. The prophecy was being fulfilled, the child of two species who would inherit the best of both. Think they'll be tall? Torres asked with a grin. Does it matter? Marcus replied, pulling Zara close. They'll be perfect whatever size they are. As the fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading home to share the news of both their military victory and the impending birth, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. He'd come here as a desperate soldier, seeking an alliance. Was leaving as a bridge between two species, a husband and soon, father. The Empress who had once laughed at human size now carried the future of both species within her. And Marcus, the small human who had dared to stand as an equal to giants, had proven that size truly didn't determine worth. The war was far from over, but for the first time, there was real hope. Human adaptability combined with Xerathi's strength, love transcending species, and a child who would be the living symbol of their union. The galaxy would never be the same. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.